Before we begin, this is yet another reminder that I will be featuring your OCs in my 2K sub-special, but in order for me to do that, you, sitting in the audience, have to watch these two videos or share them to somebody who will. Otherwise, I just won't do the special. We'll push it back to some other time. But anyway, the vegetable show is back on the brain, and so I wanted to make a sequel of sorts to the Veggietales racism video. God, I wish I'd milked that video into the ground. By discussing the big question that's on everyone's mind, how the hell do veggies hold shit? We all know that the reason why the characters are limbless is because CG animation was super new in the early 90s when the show was conceived, and having characters without arms or legs just made them less of a hassle to animate. The characters pick things up with what seems to be telekinesis, and make frequent jokes about the fact that they don't have hands.
What do I do?
Let's see. I know! You play the guitar!
Bob, I don't have any hands.
Oh, you're right.
I was thinking about this a few months ago because you'll notice that even though they seem to have telekinetic powers, this ability doesn't really work like telekinesis. The characters can't reach items that are too far away or placed behind them, almost as if they have invisible hands rather than moving things with their minds. It's especially telling when a character picks up another character or even just a heavy object. They're clearly not just floating in the air. And a Christian show would never have magic built into the world building, so what's going on here? I thought about this for a bit, and that got me thinking about their anatomy, and I realized that if I unpack veggie anatomy as a whole, then perhaps I could get to the bottom of this. So I did that. Now you may be thinking that surely I have better things to do than this, and I'm here to tell you that no, I absolutely do not. I'm exactly where I want to be, and who the hell is going to debate me on this? Genuinely, who is going to make an equally lengthy counter video in response to this one, or make a detailed Twitter thread debunking all of my points? The creators? Now disclaimer, of course, this video and by extension my channel are not for children. The inner workings of the human body are not a concern to the target audience of the show. This video might get a bit uncomfy at times. Anatomy as a subject is generally a bit uncomfy. Not for me. I love it. I don't mind the fact that we're going to talk about sex with a straight face. It's part of biology, it's going to come up. So if you have reservations about that, allow me to show you the door.
Look! The door! It's the wooden thing with the knob!
But yeah, this video has a section that is not safe for work. You have been warned. By the way, do children even watch Veggietales in the year of our Lord 2026? Because I don't have children and I'm not a Christian, so maybe I'm just out of the loop, but I'm really trying to figure out why Universal wants to milk this series so badly. Unless the original creators are fully involved, just let the series rest. I'm begging y'all, it's okay, man, I'm tired. But anyway, without further ado, let's talk about anatomy in the Veggietales universe. I should probably start by saying that watching Veggietales as a kid, I always assumed that the veggies do in fact have organs because they act so much like people. They live their lives as if they are human beings, the only real difference being that, they don't have any arms. Mind you, this almost never prevents them from doing anything. Larry is able to ride a unicycle just fine in the opening to Lord of the Beans.
But aren't those things really hard to ride?
Well, I guess at first, but I got the hang of it. No big deal. I think I'm gifted.
And you can't even reach the pedals. How are you doing that?
I'm telling you, Bob, I got a gift.
The show absolutely refuses to explain how that works, or anything, ever. We get literal crumbs in the world building department, but the nice thing about that is that you can say pretty much anything about this world, and it could be canon. For instance, a Twitter user shared their theory with Phil Fisher on veggie anatomy a long time ago. I have it posted to my Tumblr. The theory boils down to the characters all having souls that inhabit a real vegetable, and anytime their bodies are destroyed or eaten, they just go possess another vegetable. Call that shit fruits of the spirit. Which is why the characters all look and sound different episode to episode. I don't think that Phil liked this theory, but I did, and my opinion is the only one that matters. However, I don't think this is how it works, because I don't think that the Veggietales characters are real vegetables. Real vegetables exist in this universe, and they are fully edible, but Bob, Larry, and everyone else, they aren't actual vegetables. And the reason why I subscribe to this is because Mike Naraki has said a couple of times that it is okay for talking vegetables to eat non-talking vegetables, which leads me to believe that they are simply not the same.
Do we have any Apple characters?
Now, see, this is a bit of a question. Thank you for bringing that up. Please don't write us that this was cannibalism.
Well, yeah, as long as a vegetable or fruit is not talking, it's okay to eat it. Even if you are a talking vegetable.
That's the new rule.
It's interesting the rules we have. Yeah,
we kind of make them up as we go.
And so if that's the case, then that means that our ragtag team of girl failures aren't filled with tomato or cucumber or squash or what have you, but rather something else is going on biologically. This video is basically my personal headcanon stated very matter-of-factly. I just don't think that watching me hem and haw would be very entertaining. So if you don't agree, You don't have to. Also, I will try to stay within the confines of what's realistic for this show, but I will be ignoring canon if it contradicts with my analysis. I don't mean to undermine the creators, but they don't have 90% of a bachelor's degree in biology. I do. And not every piece of canon is reliable evidence for my claims. For instance, I want to bring your attention to this frame of It's a Meaningful Life. In the opening of this episode, Larry's character is severely injured. He falls onto Mr. Lunt's character, and then onto the ground. And in the hospital, despite the fact that he can move just fine, everything is bandaged, representing an injury that he never properly heals from. Now, I'm not here to be nitpicky about what this specific injury was and how it translates to a cucumber. I'd actually just like to point out this. This X-ray implies that veggies have bones. You can very clearly make out a spinal column, some ribs, and a pelvis, but no skull. Admittedly, I'm not the best at reading X-rays, but this outer white part is like his skin, right? It's consistent with what would be his skin in this image. What's the point of having a skeletal system if you're not going to protect the organ that matters the most? Your brain. And they don't have legs, so why would they need a pelvis? To accommodate childbirth, which this episode also implies is a thing in this world? Please don't piss me off. The pelvis is one of my favorite bones. We're not doing this. And so for this reason, I don't think that this background detail is a reliable piece of canon info, even though it's technically canon. Which, by the way, is perfectly fine. Its existence is amusing, which is probably why they included it, not necessarily as an intentional and thought-out element of the world building. Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing that this show specifically doesn't world build. It doesn't prevent it from achieving its main goal of teaching children values to live by. But I'm not a child who needs to learn those values, so my entertainment comes from the characters themselves. There are 11 human body systems: the Integumentary System, the Circulatory System, the Respiratory System, the Muscular System, the Skeletal System, the Immune System, the Digestive System, the Nervous System, the Urinary System, and the Reproductive System. In humans, it's kind of impossible to have one without the other. Most of you know erythrocytes, aka red blood cells, carry oxygen and nutrients to the cells in your body and remove CO2 and waste. So respiration and digestion depend on circulation. But did you know that blood cells are actually made inside your bones, specifically these ones? These are called long bones. So no skeletal system wouldn't just keep you from moving, it would also mean no blood. However, I don't think that the vegetables have all of these systems. Whatever systems they don't have, we'll assume that plant biology has them covered, which I'm not as well versed in, so I had to do some research. Lots of research. I did my very best, but things may not be 100% scientifically accurate. I wanted to be done with this script before the semester ended. I didn't bother to watch every single frame of every piece of Veggietales media to ensure that this video was 110% loyal to the canon, so if there's a moment in Bob and Larry Go Country where someone mentions a family member getting treatment for
dermatomyositis,
oh motherfucking well, I didn't take it into account. I will most likely make mistakes. It's almost finals week and I'm squeezing 2 different courses into one YouTube video. So if I say something inaccurate or too oversimplified, science is all about collaboration, so feel free to respectfully correct me down below. And if you have any questions about either the science or the actual lore, please ask me. I will try to make things digestible, but biology is really hard. This was not an easy script to write. It took me weeks, and I learned so much more plant biology than I ever wanted to know. You know, I always say that a basic turtleneck would never do me wrong, but I look like The Rock right now. I don't like that. That's slightly better. I think some of these concepts will be a little bit easier to understand if I write them up on the board, so unfortunately I had to get on camera for this. I'm extremely camera shy, so if I'm awkward or anything, I can't do anything about that, okay? You're just gonna have to let it be. Anyway, before we truly dive into the anatomy portions, let's go over some basic concepts so that we're all on the same page before dissecting these little guys. First of all, in order for this whole video to work, we have to assume that the veggies, capital V, aren't just filled with, vegetable. Or at least not entirely. The way I see it, all veggies are composed of plant cells at the molecular level. Plants are eukaryotic, that is, that they're multi-celled organisms. Plant cells are pretty similar to animal cells in that they have organelles like the nucleus, smooth and rough endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, and ribosomes floating around in the cytoplasm. But they differ in a few key ways. Plants have chloroplasts, which perform photosynthesis and uses light to convert carbon dioxide and water into sugar and oxygen, which the plant can use for energy. Chloroplasts make a compound called chlorophyll, which is what makes leaves green. Of course, you might be familiar with the fact that the major difference between plants and animals is that plants have a cell wall, and there are tiny openings in these walls called plasmodesmata for communication and transport of materials with adjacent cells. Oh my god, somehow I completely forgot to mention that cells have a giant vacuole. That was kind of important, Lasso, what the heck? Anyway, in animal cells, the vacuole is about this size, in plant cells it's about this size, and it allows the cell to maintain tonicity, or the balance of water inside and outside the cell, a concept that'll be super important later. A group of cells that come together to form a specific function are known as tissues. A group of at least 2 different types of tissues coming together to perform a function are known as an organ. Normal plants have tissues and therefore they have organs, just not in the way that we think of them. Now, since the Veggietales characters are stated and shown to not be the same as normal vegetables, we can assume that their biology drastically differs from normal plants. I would argue that the veggies are comprised of both plant organs and animal organs, seeing as they're more complex than normal vegetables, but they clearly aren't animals either. Actually, technically speaking, they wouldn't be comprised of plant organs, they are plant organs. Fruits and vegetables are just different parts of the plant, and we're gonna put organs inside them. We have fun on the Sheriff Lasso YouTube channel. This show is so careful to not show any kinds of injuries on any of the veggies. No matter how much pain these characters go through, the most the show will give us is like a black eye, which is lame. Now, normally a character will be injured 1 minute, almost always off screen, and then the next time we see them, they're in bandages. Even if it makes no logical sense for them to be bandaged. Larry Boy is fighting the rumor weed in the sewer by himself. Where did this bandage come from? But the fact that bandages can be applied means, of course, that they can heal. Normal plants heal by having cells adjacent to the damaged area multiply until the compressed area is covered. The thing is that the veggies are often getting themselves into injuries that I really don't think that a normal vegetable could come back from. Something I find noteworthy is the fact that Madame Blueberry and other characters have beauty marks and freckles. They have hair, can sweat, receive sensory input. Archie even turns pale after not getting sunlight for 3 days. I'd say this is a pretty strong argument to prove that they have some kind of working integumentary system beyond just normal plant dermal tissue. Our skin has 3 layers: the epidermis, which is the top layer that you can see, the dermis, which is where sweat glands, nerves, hair follicles, and blood vessels are located, and the hypodermis, or the subcutaneous layer, which contains mostly adipose or fat tissue. Now, I don't see why this couldn't be the same for the veggies, although fat tissue may be a bit of a stretch. I don't know, something about that doesn't feel quite right. Fat in this context is basically just connective tissue though, so maybe we can assume that their hypodermic layer is just some kind of loose connective tissue. Out of habit, I tend to combine the muscular system and the skeletal system, so we're gonna smush them together. Now, this is the one that I'm the most relieved by, because the idea of them having bones and meat is incredibly creepy to me. But despite the evidence that the show has shown us, I don't think that these vegetables have bones, or muscle. While they can, of course, move around by hopping, that's kind of all they do. Building 2 whole organ systems for such limited motion is kind of pointless evolutionarily speaking. Like, it would cost them so much energy to maintain a system that doesn't do much of anything, and 9 times out of 10, evolution is gonna favor energy efficiency. And I already know that some people in the comments are gonna be like, okay, but there are organisms that don't move around much that still have muscles and bones. Shut up! We are not putting meat in these guys! But the characters are still able to carry out voluntary movement, along with being able to stand upright. So how are they moving? Well, I would argue the same way that plants move in the real world. Back in first year, we learned of a mechanism that allows plants to move if they've been touched. That mechanism is known as turgor pressure. Turgor is the pressure inside the cell that results from water diffusing into it. Diffusion is just the passive movement of a substance across a semi-permeable membrane. So that just means that it can get inside the cell without having to find, like, a channel or something. Think of this pressure as being similar to, say, filling up a balloon with water. Animal cells can't be filled with water like that. They bust open. However, plants can be filled with water like this, partially because the cell wall keeps them structurally sound, but also in due to that giant vacuole I talked about earlier. Vacuoles regulate the osmosis of a cell, storing solutes inside it so as to draw the water inside. Water is always going to follow the area of high solute concentration because this will maintain equilibrium. Now, when a plant receives a stimulus, such as sunlight, heat, wind, or in the case of mimosa plants, touch, tiny electrical impulses are generated. This triggers ions, which are just charged particles like chloride or potassium, to move from one side of the leaf to the other. And because the plant likes to maintain osmosis, water is going to follow those ions and move in that direction, which results in the movement of the plant. Now keep in mind this process is for like leaves, but we're using our imagination to apply it to the veggies as well. He is way too high. Okay, that's awesome. Whenever one of the veggies wants to move, they're way too high. Okay, fuck me. The brain will send a signal down to, say, their lower half, which will then trigger the movement of ions. I'd imagine in this direction, but I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me. This will, in turn, cause the water to follow suit. And this movement of water at the molecular level will allow the character to hop around. They can also dance, blink, move their mouths around to speak and eat, and even adjust the lens of the eye so that they can detect near and far objects. All of these processes involve muscle movement in humans and animals. This would also apply to, like, their internal organs as well, such as the heart, diaphragm, stomach, etc. All of those organs are in fact muscular. You may remember from school that they're made of an involuntary muscle called smooth muscle, and the heart is actually made of a different kind of muscle called cardiac muscle. Now, if the movement of water seems like a very strange mechanism for the characters to move at the molecular level, I just want you guys to know that the way that muscles work at the molecular level is so much more contrived and complex, and I honestly kind of still struggle to wrap my head around it after having learned it in 3 different classes. Now, the skeletal system also provides protection, but if we assume that the veggies don't have that, then they're not as protected. Honestly, I think they'll be fine. I think the plant cell wall should provide them with enough structure to not, like, die. I just really don't want them to have bones, okay? Now, of course, they do still have dentition, which is a part of the skeletal system, but, like, those serve a specific purpose, mastication. So I personally count those as part of the digestive system, and that's how I learned it anyway. And it's probably how you're gonna learn it if you decide to take anatomy. Now, this is one of my favorite human body systems. The main components of the circulatory system are the heart, blood, and blood vessels. Now, like I said before, this show is very careful with making sure that you never see what's inside these characters. To be honest, I don't even think it's, like, entirely because it's a family-friendly show. I feel like the creators aren't too sure. Like, it's not like the show completely shies away from that kind of violence.
I've seen that on TV. You can cut a can with it and still slice a tomato.
Oh no! The water has turned to blood!
Yes, they're loving it.
The veggies also have this weird obsession with kitchen knives. Moth to a flame type shit, I guess. Now, we've seen evidence that the characters can get black eyes, which means they can bruise and therefore have blood, right? Well, much like with bones and muscle, it's very creepy to me to imagine these guys being filled with blood. I don't know, it doesn't feel right. Honestly, I'm kind of going back and forth on this one. Like, I don't know if they could hypothetically have blood. Like, I did say earlier that red blood cells are made inside of bones, but I don't think that prevents them from not having blood. I mean, we could just say it's made elsewhere, like the spleen or something, I don't know. That's where white blood cells are made. I'm sure that vegetable spleens wouldn't mind taking on the extra work. Now, even though your blood is red, it's primarily made of a clear substance called plasma, which is mostly just water. The red comes from erythrocytes, also known as red blood cells, which transport oxygen, nutrients, carbon dioxide, and waste to and from your cells, respectively. Another component of the circulatory system is the heart. The heart is a muscular organ that receives continuous electrical impulses from the brain so that it can beat, typically around 60 to 100 times per minute at rest. Now, during those beats, the heart fills up with blood and pushes it outwards to the lungs and body. Plenty of creatures fare just fine without hearts, but spoilers for the next segment, I'm pretty convinced that they have lungs, and you can't really separate the lungs and heart, so I think that the veggies should have some kind of cardiovascular system. So let's go ahead and give them a heart made of plant cells that mimic cardiovascular tissue, in the sense that it isn't voluntary and can work continuously until they die, and use turgor pressure to beat. Now, you'll notice that the heart has these arteries and veins attached. Those are blood vessels. Plants, on the other hand, have xylem and phloem, which transport water from the roots and leaves and bring food from the leaves to the rest of the plant. There's this thing called capillary action that allows water to flow upwards against the flow of gravity when it's in a tube, which is how vascular plants like trees work. But I think we can just attach these vessels to the chamber of our vegetable heart and call it a day. Maybe in the Veggies they don't use the word artery and vein, they use the word xylem and phloem. I think that's pretty funny. Now, I'm pretty desperate to not give them blood, so let's just say that their vessels have mostly just water, nutrients, maybe some salts, ions, and proteins. The nutrients can enter the cells via the plasmodesmata that I mentioned earlier. So, if you cut them open, they would just be water. Which I suppose mixed with, like, the rest of the stuff that's flowing in the vessels would just look like fruit or vegetable juice. I think I can live with that.
Breathe, bro, breathe!
Now, even though these two systems are heavily intertwined and often thought about together, where I was uncertain about the circulatory system, I'm actually pretty confident that they have lungs. Not just because we see them breathing, like, all the time, but even if we assume that they have a more simplified respiratory system, like those seen in flatworms, they, like, talk and sing. You kinda need a respiratory system for that. Photosynthesis and cellular respiration would also be a method for them to breathe, but the thing is that not all the veggies have green on them, so while we can assume that the veggies with green on them can photosynthesize, I don't think that it would be nearly enough oxygen to maintain all of their other body functions. I mean, you have to remember that these guys aren't normal plants. They're walking, talking vegetables. They would generally consume far more energy than a normal plant that just kind of hangs around in one spot. Besides, air has to pass through the vocal cords in order for you to speak, which...
I just stood there until the fire department came and broke the lock with the crowbar, and I had to fix me then we couldn't even talk to each other until the 5th week, because both of our lips were so swollen, and when you get that speaking,
They do. I don't think any fancy modifications are required here. Air enters via the nose or mouth, travels through the pharynx and the larynx, where the vocal cords are located, goes through the trachea, the bronchi, gets inside the lungs, where gas exchange occurs via the alveoli. Why would I write that? Setting myself up for failure. Then the air goes back up the way it came. Simple.
Commercial break!
Ahem. A brief intermission before we jump back into things. First of all, if you're still here, hi. Thank you for watching this far. I hope that you're enjoying the video. And if you are, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I would like that a lot. So I don't talk about this a lot, but my household is very dysfunctional. And while it is a privilege to be able to live at home, I would like to move out so that I don't go insane. So I'm hoping to move out in the next year, if not the next year, at least in the next couple of years, and so obviously I have to save money. Additionally, I'm still in school. Being able to know this much, it's quite costly. And so there's a couple of things that I'm asking for. So number one, if you'd like to support me directly, I have commissions open, and I also have Ko-Fi. If you could either buy a commission or leave me a tip on Ko-Fi, that would be great. But if you don't have extra cash to spend, that's okay. The other thing that I'm asking for is for you guys to just watch my videos, because I'm hoping to get monetized, and I need quite a bit more watch hours in order to be eligible. So if you guys could just watch my other videos and just bump up those views, that would be great. I'm gonna try my hardest to make these videos semi-regularly over the summer, and kind of try to figure out a good process for when I'm back in school. But yeah, if you guys could help me just get more views so that I can make money off these videos, because I work really hard on them. Of course, I love working on these videos. I don't really mind doing it for free, but if I can get some extra cash, I definitely should. So if you guys could do that for me, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much. Okay, back to the video. The Veggietales characters definitely eat. We've witnessed it time and time and time again. While I like to think that some of the characters are able to photosynthesize for no other reason than I just like the headcanon, like I said before, I don't think that it would be enough to sustain them. Even for someone like Bob, who has leaves and would theoretically be the best photosynthesizer, unlike real plants, these guys walk and talk, and according to my own interpretation, have, like, organs. Besides, the food can't just be, like, disappearing into the void whenever they eat. They have to extract nutrients from it. Otherwise, what's the point? Now, plants also get their nutrients from their roots in the soil, mainly nitrogen, but these guys don't have roots. None anymore, anyway. So they definitely have some kind of digestive system. Now, I'm sure you all have heard of the Venus flytrap. They, along with pitcher plants, flypaper traps, and bladder traps, are carnivorous. They're able to derive some of their nutrients from insects and small animals. These plants evolved to survive in habitats that may not provide them with all of the nutrients they need to survive. In animals, the different parts of the digestive system work to aid in the ingestion, breakdown, and absorption of nutrients from food. I wrote food, it's nutrients. But carnivorous plants don't have all these organs, so how do they process their food? Well, the veggies have mouths, and although they aren't always visible, they do have teeth and they have tongues, which is perfect because it allows them to physically break down their food. We can even assume that their saliva has enzymes that break down simple sugars, just like we do. Now, I don't know how this would work for, like, the cucumbers that only have one tooth. Maybe we can assume that the rest are retractable, like we saw in episode 3. Also, why do the women not have one tooth? Why is one-toothedness a sexual dimorphism in cucumbers? What biological advantage does that serve? It might not be. The designs of the cucumbers are pretty inconsistent. Like Larry's brothers all have one tooth in Duke and the Great Pie War, but then in Pistachio, Steve's tooth is missing and Bob now has, like, a gap. These are not animation mistakes, by the way, they were redesigned. We've never seen Larry's mother, but in this photograph and flashback, she had one tooth, so maybe it's not entirely sex-specific, kind of like how men tend to be taller and women tend to be shorter, but it's not a hard and fast rule, and can also be based on external factors like geographic location and lifestyle. Anyway, I went off on a tangent. Our stomachs produce hydrochloric acid, which has a super low pH that provides a lovely environment for enzymes and scares off most bacteria. Carnivorous plants also produce digestive fluids and enzymes that are quite acidic, including enzymes similar to pepsin, which allows them to digest proteins, which...
What's a kielbasa? It's pretty much just meat. Oh.
Checks out. They've even been shown to have glands that excrete these substances. Now, those broken down nutrients need to go somewhere, or else you just wasted a ton of energy for nothing. In humans, after your food is finished being digested by the stomach, it heads into the small intestine, where there are these finger-like projections called microvilli, which increase the surface area of the small intestine and basically make food absorption more efficient. So your food gets absorbed by the microvilli straight into the bloodstream, and then your red blood cells then take those nutrients and give it to the other cells of your body. Now, Venus flytraps have actually been shown to have transporter proteins that allow them to absorb nutrients from their prey. If we assume that the veggies have similar transporter proteins, then maybe they don't need intestines. So sadly, I don't get to talk about the gut microbiota. Maybe next time. Now, one thing I was curious about is what they do with the materials that can't be digested. See, for us, whatever nutrients the body doesn't use are excreted as waste via the rectum and anus. I looked up what carnivorous plants do with their indigestible materials, usually the exoskeleton of whatever insect they ate, and the answer was basically just, since Venus flytraps only have one entrance, when the trap opens back up, the exoskeleton just kinda falls out. Okay, I didn't want to do this, but I feel like it's more merciful to just assume that the veggies have a backdoor exit to get rid of the waste. We can't see it because we have no business seeing it, but it's there. Just like with other shows where characters are usually naked, it's like, your genitalia is there, we just don't need to see it. Hello chat, it is 8 a.m. in the morning on Friday, May 29th. I don't know why I'm giving the date and time. I think it's to show how close this is to the video actually debuting. But I actually got stuck on this part where I talk about the intestines because I was like, but if we're assuming that they can make a stool, where is that stool made? You know what I mean? Because for Venus flytraps, right, they don't chew the insect that they eat, right? They just break it down and pull the nutrients out of it. The thing that's expelled is the exoskeleton. And so I'm thinking, okay, but they're not like shitting out an exoskeleton. It's like actual food. So you chew your food, right? And then when it's in the esophagus, I believe it's called a bolus, and then it enters the stomach, the acids break it down, from there it goes into the small intestine, and that, like, mesh of food is called chyme. And so when the chyme gets into the small intestine, that is where most of the nutrients are absorbed. Then it gets into the large intestine, and that's where water is absorbed. The large intestine absorbs as much water as it can from that mesh of food until it is no longer a mesh of food and it is shit. And then obviously you know what happens after that. And so I'm like, I don't know, could they just go straight from the chyme to just expelling that out? But then it would be really acidic though, right? Maybe? Actually, shout out to FNat the Veggie Boy on TikTok for pointing this out. But as you can see in this background image from Lenny and the Lost Birthday, the show is implying that they have like digestive organs. Which it's like, thank you for pointing this out, because I didn't even know where to start looking for this image, to the point where I was like, maybe I imagined it. But no, I didn't. It's there. So yeah, maybe they could have intestines, maybe they can't. I think this one, I'm kind of at a toss-up here, so I think we can say that either works. You know, they could have like a small intestine, or they could just expel the kind. I don't feel the need to be a contrarian here. I'm gonna call this one, let's discuss it in the comments, because I need to finish this video. I actually halted production completely because I'm stuck on this point, and I'm like, Lasso, you gotta get this shit done. So yeah, let's just discuss down below. Now, the purpose of the urinary system is to filter out any waste products that might be in the blood, along with excess water.
I still really have to go to the...
That tells me everything I need to know, because why did Bob take a step backwards? The characters mention having to go to the bathroom pretty often for a show that otherwise entirely avoids that kind of humor. So yeah, I just feel like if Bob has nothing to worry about, why take a step back? Anyway, I don't think that any fancy modifications are required here either. Kidneys, ureter, bladder, urethra that connects to the outside world, let's send them on their way. I love the idea of mold being something that these characters have to worry about contracting. We have never seen that in the show. In fact, every time they get sick, it seems to just be like a normal cold. But my god, what a missed opportunity. Even though once a fruit or vegetable becomes moldy IRL, there's not really much you can do to salvage it, I imagine that the veggies can fight off fungal infections. We can even assume that there are pathogens that affect some veggies but not others, kind of like purple spot for asparagus. The immune defenses actually start out pretty simply. This is called the first line of defense. Your skin provides a physical barrier from the outside world, the mucus made in your nose catches germs and allows you to expel them, even your tears produce chemicals that have antibacterial properties. Among other things, these are just the first three that come to my mind. But we can assume that the same holds true for the veggies. Now, if an invader does manage to enter the bloodstream, it will usually hijack your cells in order to make more copies of itself, thus destroying the cell in the process. When your body catches wind of this, white blood cells will fight them off and store information about them so that you never contract that illness again. However, the reason why you can be infected by the same virus multiple times is because they can mutate into slightly different variants that the immune system does not recognize. A pretty flawed system, if you ask me. But while all of this is going on, the immune system will do everything in its power to keep the virus from continuing to destroy your cells. And this is where the symptoms of whatever illness in question come from. So a respiratory infection may result in a lot of coughing, sneezing, and congestion because the body is trying to physically get the microbes out. So it turns out that plants also have immune defenses. They even have genes that combine to proteins made by pathogens and trigger the hypersensitive response. This response prevents the pathogen from spreading any further, produces antimicrobials, and results in long-term protection for the plant, called systemic acquired resistance. I think that we can assume that a stronger version of this defense system is present in the veggies, and that the hypersensitive response manifests as the symptoms that we've witnessed from them when they do fall ill. Hormones are chemicals that your body makes in tiny amounts in order to stimulate some kind of bodily change. You may already be familiar with the reproductive hormones estrogen and testosterone, whose production causes the body to develop features that facilitate reproduction and mark the individual entering adulthood. Plants also have hormones, most of which facilitate growth, but there are some for defenses against pathogens, fruit ripening, and some that even inhibit or promote other hormones. I don't see why the veggies couldn't also produce certain human hormones like cortisol, leptin, insulin, melatonin, any function that's dictated by hormones. Now, since the veggies can be male and female, does that mean that we can assume that their seeds produce hormones that determine whether a veggie develops socially male or female traits, kind of like the ovaries and testes? I'm not asking you, I'm thinking out loud. And the answer is maybe? There's really no phenotypic difference in male and female veggies other than like their voices and their seeds. I feel like you wouldn't truly know what your sex is as a veggie unless they know what their seed does, so I feel like they're all just guessing. Unless, of course, they have technology to figure that out, kind of like ultrasound technology, which maybe they do. Speaking of which, this one I thought about a lot because this image exists. Listen, I'm not trying to body shame. There's nothing wrong with pregnant bodies in general on humans. This is horrifying, and the fact that her stomach is just like a circle is so upsetting to me. Like, maybe it's because she's facing forward, but I don't like this. Like, I'm not even bothered by the implication that they can have intercourse. Like, sure, whatever. If that's what the show wants to imply, then fine. This episode took many creative liberties in the biology department. It is madness. But I genuinely don't think that the vegetables can reproduce like this. There's a couple of pieces of dialogue that support this idea. For instance, in Larry Boy and the Angry Eyebrows, Ma Mushroom threatens Larry by saying that he's gonna wish that he'd, quote, never fallen off the vine. But the other is in the song Belly Button. In the song, Mr. Lunt expresses dismay to his love interest over the fact that he doesn't have a belly button, and Khalil informs him that it's all good actually, because, quote, his umbilical equivocal is up there on his head. He then follows up with, you could opt for a prosthetic, but of course you'd have to know that it'd be covered by your shirt, but not your HMO. When I tell you every day I wake up seething with rage over the fact that this show was not my creation, I just figured out what that meant, like, recently. That's so fucking funny. The babies in this universe also have like a stem thingy on their heads that the adults don't have, so yeah, with this in mind, we can assume that the veggies were not born, but rather grown. And listen, I don't want to see any comments being weird about the fact that I'm talking about sex. I warned you this was coming. It's not inherently wrong. Don't believe everything the colonizer religion tells you. Anyway, 90% of the cast aren't vegetables, botanically speaking, they're fruits. And the fruit is the mature ovary of a flower that protects its seeds. So what I'm going to do is go over how fruit reproduction works, and then we can talk about carrots and asparagus, the two most common actual vegetables on the show. You may want to take this section with a grain of salt. Of all the plant topics I had to learn for this video, reproduction is the one I'm the least confident in, even though this is like straight out of a biology textbook. Now, I don't know how common knowledge this is, but plants have sexes just like animals. Flowers can be male and female. Female flowers produce seeds that develop into the fruit, and male flowers produce seeds that produce pollen, which contain sperm. Pollen has to be put inside of a female flower in order to be fertilized, and sometime after that happens, the ovary of the flower develops into the fruit, and that fruit's seeds can be planted to produce more flower. So instead of pregnancy, we can assume that expecting veggies have to nurture a seedling into a flower until it bears a child, and at some point in, quote, prenatal development, the child just kind of naturally falls off the plant. Since they're bigger and denser than normal vegetables, childhood development has to be completed off the vine, hence why veggies have an infantile period and don't just reach their adult ripeness on the actual plant. Maybe we can even assume that hospitals in this world have a ward where flowers that bear sentient fruits are kept and nurtured once the seedling begins to sprout. This way healthcare professionals can keep an eye on their development. And before you ask, no, it would not be remotely weird to own flowers or even grow non-sentient vegetables because, again, it's not the same thing. It's kind of like going to the beach in a bikini. That's not inherently sexual by itself, it's just a thing that we do. But this does in fact mean that the veggies have to have some kind of entrance because plenty of characters in the show are shown to have parents, so they can't die to get the seed out for reproduction, unless there's a whole adoption system going on, but where's the fun in that? Wait, that's perfectly plausible. The characters could all just have adoptive parents, and since veggies have multiple seeds, it means they can still be related to their siblings. But if that's the case, that means they can't do it for pleasure. The actual concept of the religious show having characters that physically can't do it for pleasure, in terms of the main event, is the funniest thing in the world to me. I need to contact the author of Pounded by Produce. Anyway, while the adoption theory does work for this show and what it is and is perhaps more appropriate, I mean the show is far more willing to tackle the subject of death, this is only one theory, and to be honest, it doesn't seem too practical because then you'd have to consent to your seeds being planted and it would leave a lot of orphans and like, what happens if your partner dies like way before you? Besides, I would be pretty disappointed if I didn't get to mention that if there is an entrance, then perhaps their seeds are retrievable. And the process of retrieval might induce intimate stimulation. Listen, I don't really see the point of dancing around the subject when we're literally all thinking it. We're all adults here, or almost adults. We should be. It's a normal biological process, and given that all parties are consenting, it's completely normal to enjoy it. Not me though. I'm asexual, but y'all stay safe out there. Anyway, I don't want to get too descriptive, but for simplicity's sake, we can assume that unlike in real fruits, the veggies have a hollow organ of sorts akin to the uterus where the entrance leads, that holds the seeds so that they aren't just like accidentally dismembering people. You know, it wouldn't be very fun if you and your partner are trying to make love and you reach in and you grab like one of their internal organs and just pull it out, you know? That would be disastrous. Not a perfect analogy, of course, because fruits already are reproductive organs, so we've kind of got a Russian nesting doll situation, but whatever. This organ also wouldn't be sex-specific, like the penis and vagina, since the difference in sex comes from the seed itself. Now, vegetables are really weird because unlike fruits, which are basically just flower ovaries, vegetables are a bit more vague botanically. A vegetable is basically just any other part of the plant that's edible as long as it isn't the part that contains the seeds, which may be the roots, stems, or leaves of the plant. There are so few actual vegetables in Veggietales that it's genuinely hilarious. And only a small handful of those guys are even so much as secondary characters, let alone main. Now, every carrot we see in the show, interestingly, has no trace of a stalk, aside from in the Larry Boy cartoon. When the stalk becomes tall enough after 2 years, it produces a flower that bears the seeds following pollination. The edible part of the carrot is actually the root of the plant. So how would a sentient carrot reproduce? Well, Laura's design actually changes at the end of the series, in which she goes from a baby carrot to a normal carrot, implying that she went through puberty. First of all, I adore the idea that the veggies may start as their mini versions like cherry tomatoes and shallots and then develop into quote-unquote adult versions. That is so cute. I cannot emphasize enough how much I love Laura's redesign at the end of the show. But I have to wonder if this means that adult carrots can grow a stalk that has to be removed so that it can be planted and develop into a flower, and that's how they reproduce. Most of them stand on the end that the stalk would grow from, so maybe you gotta induce it to come out or something? Anyway, now asparagi on the other hand are the stalks of the plant. This part here is called the spear and the top parts are the buds. They do have seeds, but they can also reproduce via planting the crown or root system, which is like this thing. The spears of the asparagus grow from that root. Now the root can stick around year after year, so maybe unlike with the fruits, asparagi can just adopt the babies that show up during harvesting season. I actually don't have very many ideas for how this process could be more intimate. Not to downplay adoption or anything, especially as someone whose biological family is very toxic and dysfunctional, but I find asparagus reproduction a bit underwhelming, so if any of you have ideas on how to make it more interesting, I'd love to hear it. And on that topic, if you guys do anything with any of these headcanons, like, fanfiction. I don't even really like fanfiction, but if you do something with anything I said in this video, I will read it, so send it my way.
Okay, everybody who's got hands, start tying.
And now we come upon my area of semi-expertise. The vegetables definitely have brains.
Who would kidnap Bob? Space aliens. Or worse, vegetarians.
If you can believe it, they have to have brains at the very least to form conscious thoughts and complex feelings. The brain has protective tissue surrounding it called the meninges that keep it safe and produce cerebral fluid. But since they have no skulls, they're not as protected, which explains a lot. Now, they don't have a spine, of course, not in the traditional sense, but they would have a spinal cord that extends off the brainstem so that their neurons can reach every part of their body. Those are horribly drawn neurons, my god. Neurons are the cells of the nervous system that allow for communication inside the body. They collect, integrate, conduct, and transmit information. Electrical signals travel within the neuron upon being stimulated, and in this area called the axon terminals, they release chemicals called neurotransmitters in order to communicate with other cells. The two basic somatic neurons in the body are sensory and motor neurons. Sensory neurons gather information from the body and take it to the brain to be processed, whereas motor neurons receive information from the brain in order to move the body. We don't see any ears on the characters, even though they act like they're there.
I've got slushy in my ear.
The show plays it off like a joke, but some reptiles, such as snakes or turtles, don't have external ears, but do have eardrums that connect to an inner ear. Hearing is basically the conduction of sound, so maybe this is how it works with the veggies as well. But then again, I have been poking imaginary holes in these characters, so maybe they do have ear holes that just aren't visible to the viewer. Something I find interesting is that a few characters like Poggrape and Mr. Lunt lack eyeballs completely, yet seem to be able to see just fine. I'd be more than ready to headcanon that they're able to navigate the world with their other senses, but they react to visual stimuli and can read. As a matter of fact, why does Poggrape wear glasses? Glasses are meant to refract light so that it lands on the right spot in the back of the eye, but where is the light going? I honestly don't have much of an explanation for this. I don't know. It's just how it is. I can see how the peas are able to see with just their pupils, but I don't know. I guess it's just weird. I mean, I guess that because the veggies' eyeballs are 90% on the outside of their heads, I'm making this up. This is not in the script. I guess since their eyeballs are on like the outside of their heads, then the retina would be pretty close to the front of their skull. They don't have a skull. It would be close to the front. That's what I'm trying to say. So maybe visual information is just going straight into the optic nerve. That doesn't seem quite right, but sure. I mean, the cells in your eye are supposed to convert the light information into signals that the optic nerve can actually transmit. I guess the cones and the retinas are just right here. Huh, sure. I guess. The cones and the retinas are just on the outside of their bodies for some reason.
You said that Larry's Lemonade Plus would make my eyes visible. And look!
Sorry, I just came up with that on the spot. That is horrifying. Okay, so Poggrape and Mr. Lund are freaks of nature. We kind of already knew that, but now I've confirmed it. Anyway, all the other senses work as you would expect, so I don't feel the need to go into detail there. As we've determined, veggies don't have muscle, but they can still move via water movement at the molecular level. When I want to pick something up, my brain will send a signal down my spinal cord to the nerves in my arm. When the nerves that touch those muscles at the neuromuscular junction release a chemical called acetylcholine, it results in my muscles contracting, which in turn allows me to move. This same basic principle would apply in the veggies, except those chemicals would trigger the movement of ions, which would then trigger the movement of water entering and exiting the cells, thus allowing them to move. So with this in mind, what is happening when they pick up an object? Well, we're going to have to get into a bit of science fiction territory. God, I wish I had more than 3 colors. Well, the basic idea boils down to the veggies generating tiny electrical signals that cause objects to levitate. This is called electrostatic attraction, and it's what allows a balloon to stick to a wall after rubbing it against your shirt. In this case, the veggie is the balloon, and the object that they want to pick up is the wall. Now, you might remember from high school that all objects are made of atoms, and atoms are made of positively and negatively charged particles called protons and electrons. Now, normally stuff has the same amount of protons and electrons in them, which makes them neutrally charged, unless of course they don't, but we're not going to get into that. Now, when you rub a balloon up against your shirt, or actually I think more accurately a wool sweater or something, when you rub a balloon up against a wool sweater, the balloon takes that opportunity to snatch electrons away from it, which in turn makes the balloon more negatively charged. So when you then put the balloon up against the wall, all of the negative particles in the balloon are attracted to the positive particles that are in the wall, and thus it sticks. I'm used to drawing my notes like digitally, and so I forgot that the wall would have to be a little closer to the balloon. Just imagine it is. The worst thing that the Veggietales show did was not give Poggrape and Mr. Lund their hats. Like, how hard would it have been to animate? I say that, but I always complain whenever a reboot doesn't like slightly redesign the characters, if for no other reason than to just indicate, hey, this is the other series. You know? It's like, okay, you weren't supposed to redesign them like that though. It's okay, just a nitpick. They just look naked without the hats. That's a little bit too high. It's supposed to almost be halfway down his nose, but that's okay. Whenever a veggie wants to pick something up, their brain will send a signal down to this general area of their body. Perhaps through some mechanism that I honestly couldn't explain to you, this general area is now more negatively charged. When the positive particles in whatever object realize that there's a negative charge over here, that object will move in that direction. Now you may be thinking, Lasso, you just mansplained telekinesis. No, I didn't. It's not this, it's this. Every character that I've ever seen use telekinesis lifts objects using magic. This is more of a biological process. Now if you're wondering if being touched by another veggie would feel staticky, I would say that if it does, it's probably pretty normal for them. I mean, for me, touch is very unpleasant, so being mildly electrically shocked every time someone tries to make contact with me wouldn't feel much worse. So yeah, we're just gonna headcanon that it doesn't bother them too much. Now this of course does not really explain why anytime the characters are like physically restrained, they are completely unable to free themselves. Maybe like being tied up with ropes just straight up blocks the field or something. I mean, that doesn't make sense because clothing does not block the field. Maybe it would work if their clothes have sleeves, but they typically don't. Nor could I answer the question of,
How are we clapping?
This theory isn't 100% perfect, but when you put it all together, I think it's pretty plausible within the world. Now, I don't want to see any comments telling me that I forgot the lymphatic system. I did not forget the lymphatic system. I purposefully excluded it. I have assignments that I'm supposed to be finishing up, but instead I'm doing this. And you know what? It is a wonderful use of my time. So thank you so much for watching my lesson on veggie anatomy. I really appreciate it. Let's take this over to voiceover lasso and we'll finish up the video. Oh my god. Please say I'm done. I'm so fucking tired. Hey you guys, thank you so much for watching that video. I will leave my references down below in the description if you'd like to check them out, which if you found educational value in this video, I strongly encourage you to take a look at those. I of course tried to put the information in an engaging and simplified way to appeal to a wider audience, but it's never a bad idea to go and look for yourself. So if that's something you're interested in, then feel free to check the description. Also, reminder that most of this video was just me world building for a show that technically ended 10 years ago, then got rebooted a couple of times, but for all intents and purposes truly ended 4 years ago. Not everything is 100% scientifically accurate. I just did my best. You know, we're just gonna assume that the small scientific inaccuracies are like made up for by that specific universe. So please don't be obnoxious in the comments. I only encourage you to do corrections if one of the like objective scientific facts I said was incorrect or, you know, misleading in some way. Otherwise, please understand it is fiction. We are just having fun over here. Also, another reminder that I have a Ko-fi and I have commissions open, but if you'd like to support me more indirectly, just keep watching my videos so that I can get monetized. I think that's all I have for you for today. Please follow me on Tumblr, Instagram, and TikTok. Follow me! Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.